Live on Jimmy Dore.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's show. We got a big show. Christian Parenti's coming on later to give us the scoop on what the United States' real problem is with Cuba. Or do you say Cuba? We also will have on Nick Holster later to talk about sunscreen actually gives you cancer. We've covered it before, but there's a new study out even proving it more. But up first, special guest, Anya Parampel. She is a Washington, D.C. based journalist, contributor to The Gray Zone. She has produced and reported several documentaries, including on-the-ground reports from Korean Peninsula, Palestine, Venezuela, and Honduras. And she even wrote a book about Venezuela called Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of the U.S. Empire. Is currently ranked #1 on Amazon in the Venezuelan history category. Welcome to the show, Anya Parampel. Yes? Yes, it is.
Oh, you know how to sell my book better than I do.
Fantastic. She's here. Also, Kurt Mexican is with us, America's comedian, Kurt Mexican, the star.
It's Kabbalist, actually, Jimmy. I don't know if you know that.
I did not. No. Kurt is the star of Mystery Boys podcast, #1 on the charts.
Is it?
I don't know. It was at some point. It was. So I have. We want to talk about. There was an earthquake. There were actually 2 earthquakes in Venezuela, and as of July 3rd, the official death toll from the June 24th twin earthquakes, magnitude 7.2 and 7.5. Those are big. It stands at 2,595 deaths. The figure has risen steadily with ongoing rescue and recovery efforts. Key details: over 12,500 people were injured. Some missing tens of thousands remain unaccounted for, raising concerns that the final death toll could be significantly higher. Some forensic workers and officials on the ground believe the official count underrepresents the true number. The earthquakes caused widespread destruction, especially in coastal areas near Caracas and La Guaira. International aid continues to support search and recovery figures. So I just want to show you a little bit of this. This is satellite images from La Guaira. Am I saying that correctly, Anya? La Guaira?
La Guaira.
La Guaira. This is going to show you the devastation caused by the double earthquake. Let's watch a little bit of it. Boom. Whoa. It looks like Lebanon and Israel's bombing it, but it's not. It's an earthquake. Wow. Wow. So that's some pretty heavy duty stuff. What are you hearing from Venezuela on the devastation, Anya?
That it's unimaginable looking at that. I mean, can you imagine the horror of the people that were inside those buildings? It's hard to even watch. And so it's been shock for my friends in Venezuela. You know, my closest friend there, Diego Sequeira, who I write about a lot in the book, he, couldn't even get out in the first initial days because Caracas and La Guaira is like the epicenter of where it was. That's about a 45-minute drive away from Caracas. That's where the airport is. And that's where there was this capital city of the state there, La Guaira. It's not the capital of Venezuela, but of the state, the neighboring state. And that's where most of the destruction took place. And just to get there now is almost impossible because of the military and the fact that now it's a militarized zone. So people can't even get in or out. And so those are, that's a friend who I'm relying on going out every day and just hearing how gradually he sees the reality of the devastation and how bad it is, because it's like you can't really process it until you just see it piece by piece. I don't even think that we can from these videos. And so but then at the same time, it's this very tricky, fascinating time for Venezuela politically, because they'd already kind of started this process of opening to the United States, partnering with the United States, questions about how close the current administration is with the United States and the fact that they were conducting airstrikes on Venezuelan territory, the U.S. military was, before this earthquake. That was already a major red line that had been crossed in terms of the takeover of Venezuela's sovereignty or the destruction. And so for this earthquake to come just months into this soft coup, since the U.S. removed the elected leader and put in a vice president, yes, but has been changing the character of the country a little bit, the timing couldn't have been better for the objectives of the U.S. military to now be on the ground in Venezuela. You see American troops in Venezuelan military trucks, and you have the Israelis. For the first time, Israeli people allowed in Venezuela since 2008, when Chavez kicked the Israeli embassy staff out of the country in response to the war that Israel waged in Gaza that year in 2008. I forget which one that was. Of course, Max. This is where Max would know exactly the name of the of the operation. But they Chavez ended relations with Israel at that time, and has always Venezuela since was always very vocal in its support for the Palestinian resistance, the axis of resistance, and very vocal in opposition to the Israelis. I mean, Maduro absolutely himself was very critical of Israel. And so now to see the government thanking Israel for their presence in the country, that's quite remarkable, because, you know, it's one thing to sit back and say they were hit by a catastrophe. You're going to take all the help you could get. I'm not sure if Iran, for example, would accept an Israeli rescue team if their country got hit by a devastating earthquake, but hopefully we never have to consider that. It's just, if they're there and then they're making your government thank Israel out of like every other country that's there, it just seems like it's almost a humiliation ritual at that point. And so that is very bizarre and extreme to see as someone who has covered this government or this movement of Chavismo for quite some time.
So you bring up, that's interesting, because there are reports of Israelis on the ground there. So I'm going to get to that.
I say that's conspiracy talk, and I have to object.
Okay. But we're going to get to that in a second. But first, the thing I want to bring up is that when there was an earthquake back in 2010, Chavez declared that, in Haiti, he declared that Haiti's earthquake was the clear result of the U.S. Navy test. Meanwhile, Venezuela. So let's watch a little bit of this from RT.
And Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez has once again accused the United States of playing God. But this time it's Haiti's disastrous earthquake that he thinks the U.S. was behind. Spanish newspaper ABC quotes Chavez as saying that the U.S. Navy launched a weapon capable of inducing a powerful earthquake off the shore of Haiti. He adds that this time it was only a drill, and the final target is destroying and taking over Iran. The existence of a tectonic weapon has never been proved, but its use is often suspected by conspiracy theorists. For example, the leader of Georgia's Green Party accused Russia of being behind an earthquake on Georgian territory in 2002.
So it's always a conspiracy theory. There's conspiracies that happen every day. Every war is a conspiracy theory. 9/11, the official story is a conspiracy theory of 18 hijackers. So that it's just funny how they've weaponized and made that word toxic, even though conspiracies happen all the time. People are charged in courtrooms across the world with conspiracies every day. I just want to go back to what she was talking about.
And theories are things that we often assume are true, like the theory of gravity. That's what we call it.
Yeah, the theory of evolution. Yes.
Exactly.
So Chavez, this is from Live Science. Chavez, U.S. tectonic weapon caused Haiti quake. A tectonic weapon under testing by the United States caused the Haiti earthquake, according to the Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez, who appears to have more of a sci-fi background than we thought. President Chavez said the U.S. was playing God by testing devices capable of creating echo-type catastrophes, the Spanish newspaper quoted. Chavez said the killer earthquake followed a test of a weapon of earthquakes just offshore from Haiti. Apparently, the media in Venezuela have reported that the earthquake may be associated with the project called HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, which is different than AARP, a system that can generate violent and unexpected changes in climate. HARP, a high-frequency active oral research program, is a study run in Alaska directed by the occasional reconfiguration of the properties of the Earth's ionosphere to improve satellite communications. That's what it is.
Don't forget Ice Cube neutrino detector that my buddy Eric Hecker worked at, the one Raytheon built.
So talk about this. That's what I have. So tell me about HARP's.
HARP's ELF waves, extra low frequency waves. And you can bounce those off the ionosphere to do all kinds of stuff, not just earthquakes. The earthquake thing is kind of like, glass shattering from an opera singer. It's basically that effect. But if you read that Mind War paper that Paul Vallely, TPUSA great Paul Vallely, and Michael Aquino, the Satanist with the weird eyebrows, wrote, they said you could affect people's moods with it. And back then when he was saying this, there were all movies coming out depicting this. Kingsman, that first one, shows where everybody's cell phone makes them go crazy. Remember the Rwanda genocide where they ran those planes, C-130s, with mini HARP equipment in it, and everybody goes crazy. You could do a lot of stuff with frequency. You make people see flying saucers. And so, you do a little plasma light show, I bet.
So what was remind me of the thing from the Antarctica?
So neutrinos are these massless particles, or almost massless particles, that normally only come from space, and they had to go to Antarctica because there's no interference from other particles or something. And then the only reason I became aware of it is because they were talking about how crazy it was that they were detecting neutrinos coming out of the Earth by Antarctica. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Then, I don't know, about a year later, I see Eric Hecker in that wave of whistleblower. And his story isn't anything with space aliens. It's about how Raytheon built some kind of direct energy weapon. And of course it is. Of course it's that. And he said he thought the New Zealand
earthquake,
Christchurch earthquakes were friendly fire from testing it out because he's a sweet, naive kid. But me as a cynic, I know John Kerry got all the people out, all the American representatives out on his way down to Antarctica to check on the ice caps instead of going to that convention. Real weird coincidences before these earthquakes. Fukushima, they were saying that about because Japan supposedly had sold some uranium to Iran or something. I don't know how far-fetched that is, but they have that stuff. They just admitted to the same stuff from Havana syndrome, which was debunked, but they paid out restitution to the victims of it. So we tested on our own people. That's what that means. And then we're having MK Ultra hearings. All this stuff is connected. It's the same technology. Okay. Voice to skull, all that stuff.
We talked about this just the other day because of the MK Ultra hearings at the Congress and how they can put voices in your head, and they've admitted to being able to do this. And so, anyway, so there's that part of the story. Is this a real earthquake? Who knows? But a bigger part of the story, I think, maybe, is that there's kidnappings of children being reported. Now, we can't confirm any of this.
Like Haiti.
But it was similar to what happened in Haiti. Let me play this for you.
Something just really got me this morning. I was watching videos coming out of Venezuela, and what's going on there is worse than what we can imagine. Now, I don't have all the answers. All I can do is use my platform and my following to raise awareness on this issue, because apparently a lot of the people looking for family members, the police and military aren't allowing them to get to the areas that they need to get to. But the real disturbing thing that's going on is that apparently they are taking traumatized and orphaned children to use for child trafficking, which breaks my heart, obviously, because, well, I mean, how evil can you get? I mean, to use something as horrific as what's happened to then go to the next step and then start taking the children is just a stain on humanity. It's not even humans doing it. These people are evil. They're not even like us, right? But this is what we're dealing with. And on top of that, the police are robbing what's left of of anything people own out of the rubble. They're just taking stuff. And it's just horrific. Like I say, I don't have all the answers. Those people are, I'm very close to Latin America. I live in Mexico, so I know what the people are like, and I just want to share their suffering in the hope that it raises awareness on the issue, because what's going on out there is far worse than any of us can imagine. So please share this.
So I just want to, Anya, do you have any information about the looting or what the police and the military are doing?
I mean, I've seen videos and there are instances, obviously, of people taking advantage of this situation. I don't think that there would be any denying that, especially in a country that is very poor and wasn't experiencing its greatest years, as we've covered many times on the show. The role of U.S. sanctions and the long war that they've waged on Venezuela and creating that situation. But then when something like this happens anywhere, it's hard. I mean, it's difficult to imagine that people do this, but it's also hard to believe, to deny that there are people that take advantage of not just the situation to loot, but then to take advantage of the most vulnerable people, children. And that's something that we saw in Haiti. And there are rumors that it's much worse than we knew. And so I wouldn't doubt that there are forces working to take advantage of children in Venezuela as well. The issue that I saw with this clip is that a lot of people shared it, especially those in the opposition to the government, which at this point, like I said, things are very complicated. The government, even though it's Chavismo still in power, and they are claiming and to guard the revolution and carry on the legacy of Maduro and Chavez, there were already very many people that were critical that Venezuela had already turned over some of its sovereignty, too much of its sovereignty, to the United States. And what now critics of the government are doing, that want to overthrow the government and have for years, are doing, is using this as justification to say this is why we need total U.S. military occupation of the country. So if people are worried about children getting abused in Venezuela, we have to ask ourselves, well, is the U.S. military the force that's going to come in and protect children? Are Israeli rescuers or any...
We're going to oversee the operation.
Who is, honestly, which organizations are equipped?
Laura Silsby.
Yeah.
The Clinton Foundation will be there to help.
Yeah,
the people
because
like
all
Haiti.
of these institutions pretty much have no legitimacy in the eyes of people anymore. And people know that they're a scam after the experience of Haiti. So, and now you have Trump registering his company to start shipping products and rebuilding Venezuela. And definitely now the U.S. is in there. So the children narrative at this point is I'm sure that there are dark things going on. I'm sure that it's going to be used to justify further U.S. intervention. And at this point, it just is a complete flip from where Venezuela would have been when I was covering it 5 years ago. We would have thought that China and Russia, maybe even Iran, were leading the rescue efforts as Venezuela's allies. But on the other hand, it's like those countries were so far away, maybe it wasn't practical to think that Venezuela could be totally reliant on them. In fact, it would be better if the U.S. and Venezuela had this cooperation and we were acting in good faith. Like, that's what I would like. The problem is I don't trust the people running my government. You know, if the U.S. government were a normal government, then yeah, I would say we should go in there and help the Venezuelan military recover children. But I don't trust the people in Washington to do that.
So you have a legitimate fear that they're going to use this crisis, or maybe even manufacture a bigger crisis of child trafficking than maybe is, to justify more U.S. military occupation.
Well, that's just what they're using. It doesn't even matter at this point whether or not this narrative is what does it, because the earthquake itself has created a situation where now the U.S. military and international groups are the only forces working on the ground. They've come in after paralyzing the Venezuelan state, and now that this catastrophe hit, it's kind of like the infrastructure is set up for international aid groups and the U.S. military to just take over Venezuela. That's what they're doing.
Do you remember Indonesian earthquakes when the same thing happened? And you know, I don't know, it got filtered and the end of the day is like they were kidnapping people for UFO reasons. But the main things are earthquake kidnapping is the thing that I focus on, because this story keeps happening over and over again. I don't know if there's like an earthquake followed by missing kids.
So, well,
it happens every time.
Well, here,
and then we had the guy from Sound of Freedom on, that phony, that was, you know, basically just framing. And the first tip off was he's from Department of Homeland Security, and the second is, it was nobody in America, it's all the bad people in the brown country doing it.
Right.
So that's how they go and steal kids. They go, we got to save them from the bad guys down here in Venezuela, because our leaders have a 22,000 child a day habit of kids. I don't know if they snort them or what they do, but they got a big habit.
And that's the sad question here, is like nobody trusts anybody actually to have the interests of people. The Venezuelan state, you could say, was what you would assume should come in and they are, like, they're in the capacity that they didn't even have heavy lifting vehicles, which was, so for days people were trapped under the rubble. They weren't able to buy the equipment needed, so they had it come in from El Salvador and Mexico, and so for like over 2 days people were just trapped under rubble waiting for that. But people, you know, Venezuela has rallied, but there's only so much you can do under these conditions when again, this is the end. This came at the end of a long 2.5 decade war against this state, and now right outside the capital, this death blow comes. It's shocking.
So,
well, remember Syria? It happened to them, and it happened to
everybody,
you know, that crosses us gets an earthquake.
It's an earthquake.
It's not just, you know, Mike
that's actually
knowledge
a great point, because the earthquake in Syria set the stage for the collapse of the state. I mean, again, it came after a long war. The country had already been at war for a decade, literal civil war. There were groups, armed militant groups, controlling wide swaths of the country. And then suddenly part of it is hit with an earthquake. Oh, and guess what? Now the international aid groups and foreign military forces are there after you've already removed the state and suffocated it. Very convenient. Then, of course,
they're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to do it here. That's the big plan.
So, of course, we know that there is a history of this, certainly with the United States doing this in Haiti. American missionaries in Haiti charged with kidnapping that was connected to Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, the Clinton Foundation.
And so let me just show you this real quick. I want to show you this. This is another video. Mother reports that her daughter was rescued and that when she went to look for her, they changed her surname and she disappeared. So let's listen. Oh, is this all in Spanish? Okay, so I don't speak Spanish, so I thought this was translated, but it's not. She reports that they are stealing the children they find alone after the earthquake. That's according to this news report. But I wanted to show you something very suspicious. Israeli soldiers have been spotted in a hotel in Caracas today. And this is from yesterday, July 1st. From Wednesday. This would be the first Israeli presence in Venezuela since Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez kicked out Israeli diplomats from Venezuela before cutting all relations with Israel in 2009 because of its war on Gaza. Then, as you talked about earlier, so they're there. That's not good. Why would they already be there? Why would Israelis? They've got enough problems on their hands right now.
Ooh,
Iran, Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen. What, Kurt? What do you say?
2009 is that's way before Sean Penn killed Chavez, right? I'm kidding. So okay, Professor Zhang, he said I think on my show that because remember there was on Redacted, a bunch of places were saying that we use these energy weapons to kidnap Chavez. And
yes.
I think
well, they
Chavez
admitted to it. They admitted that Trump said they used energy weapons.
Yeah, so that's a good clue that they didn't. And he is a CIA. So Chavez gets killed. Then Maduro takes over. It's very weird. They kidnapped him and his wife for some reason, almost like extracting them out of the country. And then the Chavista government is still there. It's just like in Greece when the CIA guy ran Greece for a while. Remember Gust from that movie with Tom Hanks? Charlie Wilson's War. The guy Philip Seymour Hoffman played, the CIA installed him as the president of Greece for a bit. So we do this all the time. Chavez was the problem. He used to say this stuff all the time, and he was crazy, you know? Then he was gone. And then Maduro, nobody likes. Even people that were leftists were like, I don't like Maduro. You have to just really hate America, you know, understandably so. But my friends from Venezuela, and they're not all just rich kids that are bitter about some plantation thing. It was seen as corrupt. Look what they do with our government, with our fake democracy, right? The NGOs hollow us out.
So what is this? So right here, she says, when the U.S. used the 2010 earthquake to militarily occupy Haiti, Chavez said, I read that 3,000 soldiers are arriving, Marines armed as if they were going to war, doctors, medicine, fuel, field hospitals. That's what the U.S. should send. They're occupying Haiti undercover. So it seems like, as your fear before, and so there's the Israeli soldiers already. That's not a good look. And let me just put this. This is ex-CIA director David Steele said, Israel was created by criminals. Zionist Israel is the single greatest sponsor of child kidnapping, child PDF files, child torture, and child body parts harvesting. Children are more profitable than drugs. That was ex-CIA director David Steele said that. And of course, here is Maria Weiss, Israeli anthropologist, and she says, we do not take organs from Israeli soldiers. We take them from Palestinians or from migrant workers without any consent. Here she is actually saying it. We don't touch soldiers' bodies. We take organs from others. They used to take organs from the bodies of Palestinians. And then immigrant workers. And then they're in a skin bank. And it's what is the organ donation rate given to the population of Israel? Almost nothing. She laughs. So Israelis don't donate their organs, according to this documentary that was on Channel 2. In Israel.
Yet they have people recovering Ashkenazi sperm on the battlefield.
That's true.
Yeah, they actually are doing that. They're actually recovering the Ashkenazi sperm. She says, no, it's because they hardly ever donate Israelis. That's what she's saying. And that's
this is really anti-Semitic, Jimmy, and I'm not just saying that as a Kabbalah expert.
And, okay.
They don't even tip in organs is what you're trying.
So that clip I just showed you has circulated widely online in discussions about historical allegations of organ tissue harvesting by Israeli forensic authorities from Palestinian bodies. It was notably tied to admissions by pathologist Yehuda Hiss, former head of the Institute, who acknowledged in 2000 interview aired on Channel 2 that organs were taken without permission in the 1990s. The practice was later admitted by Israeli authorities to have occurred, but claimed to have ended. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they stopped. Just like MK Ultra's over and the CIA doesn't overthrow governments anymore. It's all over. It's all in the past.
Why? Of course they stopped trying to do that. Of course. Why would the CIA continue to do that when they never try to control everything in their sphere all the time?
And just to give you one more piece of info on this, here is Rabbi Yosef Marachi. I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced. Mizrahi. Here he's going to admit
Mizrahi.
He's going to talk about how they did this to Yemen children.
They kidnapped, I don't know how many, thousands or hundreds of Yemenite kids. Today, a few years ago, after Shimon Peres died, they found out that he was the one behind it. And the reason why they were kidnapping the Yemenite kids, because they gave them to United States. Because in United States, they used to make all kinds of experiments on black kids. Blacks in those days didn't have rights. 90 years ago, 100 years ago. They were not like what they are today. In America, it was very difficult to be black in those days. So they made all kinds of experiments on black kids until the media here started to make noise. What is this? You're doing all kinds of experiments on black kids. It became a lot of noise here. They realized they cannot continue what they are doing. They needed kids. So Shimon Peres told them, I will give you kids, but in one condition. What's the condition? You will convince the French government to build a nuclear facility in Dimona. You will tell them that we need it for civil reasons, not for nuclear bombs. We need power. The nuclear has much more power than regular electric. It can make the whole country run. We need it for, for civil reasons, not for army reasons. And the United States made a deal with him. And they convinced the French government to send their engineers for a few years in Israel. They were building the Kur in Dimona. the one that you see today. Until the last week, the French naive people and government, they really believe that Israel needs this nuclear for electric. Only when it was too late, they found out that it was a scam to begin with, that the Israeli never needed it for electric reason. They needed it to create nuclear bombs to threat the anti-Semite world that they never be able to attack Israel. This is how they believe. Once we have nuclear bombs, no one will mess with us. So that's exactly what happened. Then the French were furious when they found out. They went crazy, but it was too late for them. In the meantime, thousands of Yemenites, or I don't know the number, that's why I'm careful. It could be hundreds, could be thousands. They were, you can say, sold to America for that reason.
Why do prominent rabbis know this information and also say it like that? For a minute, I thought he was like exposing something. Then I'm like, wait, is he bragging?
Sounded like he was bragging. Sounded a little bit like he was bragging. Am I nuts, Anya, in your mind, to try to be suspicious of the Israeli soldiers already there on July 1st and this history they have of this evil, child trafficking and organ harvesting?
No, and I can tell you that the Venezuelan chavistas, like the average people, would say the same thing as you. I mean, come on. Who trusts the Israelis at this point? When you let them into your country, what do you think happens? Anything good? Like, there's not, when you think about like a similar scenario, if you knew that there was a person in your town that was like a murderer that killed all of their neighbors and continued to terrorize them and like go on a stabbing spree, would you just be like, well, I'm in a crisis in my house, I'm just going to take their help in this one scenario? Like,
I don't want to be racist.
No, I would just say this is the last thing that I need.
I don't want to be anti-Semitic and racist, so of course I would. I'm very submissive to authority.
So it doesn't look good when you see Israeli soldiers there immediately.
No.
And with a history like this, and the history of the United States, also what they did in Haiti, it's not good.
Hey, what became of Laura Silsby? Oh, that's right. She works over at Amber Alert as the vice
Are you
Amber
kidding? She actually did time for child trafficking in Haiti, and Bill Clinton got a lawyer friend of his to get her sentence reduced.
They just held her, and then a fake rabbi from the DR came and represented her. It looked like he was a Dominican Jewish rabbi. It turned out he was not a rabbi, just some guy. One of the crazy. Oh, you know what we should look out for in this case? Some rock stars to tragically hang themselves from a doorknob while looking into it. That's the next pattern that will pop up, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Well, anything you'd like to say about this whole situation, Anya, before we say goodbye?
It just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart because the people of Venezuela did not want any of this. I mean, they didn't want... It's just not fair to me. I really spent a lot of time in that country, and just to think about those places that I've been under the rubble now, it's enough after everything that's happened with Gaza. It's like, how did it come to Venezuela like this at this time? The timing was just so stunning. It was like the perfect moment to demolish what remained. And I'm sure there are people in Venezuela that are going to say that the state's holding on, and that, there are like the communes and these different things and an infrastructure there that's outside of Caracas and the capital, and that's all hopeful. But wow, is God working on the side of these people, or are these people playing God? I guess that's the question that everybody's asking.
Well, we do that to the kids here. Why wouldn't we do it to Venezuela? Every punk in this country, after the Epstein files came out, and people I know just blather nonsense and act like it's no big deal. That should have been the end of everything when that came out. Right? Yeah, just because they blacked any of it out and didn't release it. But this is a punk-ass country that allows anything. It's depraved. So guess what? They do it here all the time. Of course, we're going to do it in Venezuela. And the thing to look for now is when Maduro testifies that the Democrats and the CIA rigged the 2020 election. Because that's what Zhang said, we'll know if he was CIA or not. And I remember, because it sounds so far-fetched, but then I remember hearing the stupid Trump administration, wait till you hear about the 2020 election. And I was like, oh, it's possible, isn't it? And imagine like 2 years from now, them prosecuting that. Perfectly prosecutable, I don't care.
If he did that, it would be ostensibly to get off, right?
Right. Yeah. So if they got Maduro to testify that they were
whether it's true or not.
Correct. It would be so he could get out of prison before he dies. Him and his wife.
It's just funny, like Chavez, and what do you always hear about Venezuela? They like Chavez, and then the people that complains about Maduro, and it's the same. It's like here we get rug pulled nonstop, right? A bunch of people hope Trump was going to do some of the thing. Well, no tax on tips, good for him.
Yeah,
right? But nothing else. Everything else is rug pull.
Well, he closed the border and no tax on tips. But
I'm not counting the border because they could have just done that the whole time. It turns out.
Right. Turns out it's like flipping a switch. You don't need a wall. You could just flip a switch and you can stop immigration on this.
A lot of emotional energy spent on that wall when there was never an issue about a wall. That's kind of bitter about it, if I'm being honest, as a Kabbalist.
Just one more. So how corrupt? So when I saw what happened in Venezuela, Anya, to me, it was like, oh, okay, so they found the criminals just below Maduro that they could work with. Not that Maduro isn't also corrupt. Most leaders are corrupt. But they found the ones just below him that they could bribe and were the kind of criminals that the criminals in the CIA and the United States government and our economic hitmen could work with. And so now that's really who's running the country. Am I wrong about that, or how do you see it?
That's definitely a working theory, but I think that there are questions here. You could frame it also as, is this, if Venezuela, if Delcy were able to keep Chavismo as they see it in power and have good relations with the United States, end sanctions, open up the economy, start bringing oil to the U.S. again, maybe there are people that would argue that that's better for Venezuela in the long term, and that having this hostile relationship where someone's constantly trashing Washington, which was what was happening before. I mean, and you know, a lot of people here would hear Maduro's criticisms of the United States and think like, oh, I relate to that. Like I'm not making a judgment on what was said, but at that time, that was what, you know, animated the Chavista movement, and that was what people looked to it for. But now, for it to last, if it's going to last, should it liberalize? I mean, that's one argument people could make. Others might say, yeah, the state has completely sold out and collapsed, and that is what happened, that they sold out Maduro and they coordinated it, and they, you know, stood down while the U.S. military came in and took him out. Then there are people that would say, well, this happened. The U.S. military is stronger and mightier than we thought. They came in, they were going to kill everybody. And so Delcy and the rest have a gun to their head, and this is what they have to do. History will probably give us more answers than I can right now. But when something like this earthquake happens and you see a red line like the Israelis come in, I think that's when you pretty much have to question what's going on. Because like I said, if this happened in Iran, would the government there let the Israelis in? Like, I don't really know. It seems like you would have to protect yourself from those people.
Correct. Anya Parampel, I appreciate the author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. I appreciate your expertise. Thanks for making time, my friend, and accommodating our schedule. I always
Of course. Good to see you guys.
Okay, great to see you. Give your babies
Bye-bye.
a kiss for us. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have Nicholas Holcher on to talk about the latest study on sunscreen causing cancer. We'll be right back. It's Pride Month, and I was just in Spokane, Washington, and Tacoma, and they were all full-blown priding. And what I've been saying on stage is that it's kind of funny to me that there's a big faction of the country that sees gay people still as victims, and I have to remind them, you're victors. You're not a victim. You have won, and there's nothing you're fighting for anymore. And so now they're just using the 2SAL, LGBTQIA++, they're just using that now to. I see that as the establishment using that to keep people divided, and because otherwise people could come together easily. Do you agree with that? That gay people are the victors and they're not victims anymore?
Of course. Here's the thing. This is my view of this, which is, like I told you before, when I first, started becoming involved in, say, the fight for equality for gay people, when gay people had not won. I mean, there was no equal rights for gay people. This is, coming out of the 80s, where some of the worst things happened, like people who were married and who were living together, who were in love with each other. One of them got sick and they had no legal rights. The spouse did. And so the parents who were anti-gay were able to keep them out of the hospital room while they were dying out of the decision. Like really horrible, horrible stuff. You could easily get fired for being gay. Like no equality at all. Once that movement started succeeding, and it started succeeding not because people with opposing views were censored, not because they were canceled or demonized, but because they were persuaded.
Right.
They were persuaded that what you have in your mind of a gay person, this demonization that you've been fed, actually, what gay people are is that uncle that you've always loved, or your younger brother, or the neighbor that you have always trusted your kids with, or your teacher that, was so important in your formation. That's what ultimately persuaded people that gay people are, people and deserve the same rights as everybody else. And as I said, gay marriage wasn't even anything that anyone even thought of. That was so unrealistic. And then ultimately that became kind of the North Star of gay and lesbian politics. And then that happened. Even before Obergefell, the Supreme Court decision in 2015 that said it's unconstitutional to deny gay people the right to marry, state after state after state was democratically enacting the legalization of same-sex marriage. And then suddenly in all 50 states, gay couples and gay people had 100% full legal equality. What happened? The problem is that you have all these activist groups that are drowning in huge amounts of money, these big establishment DNC adjacent groups like the Human Rights Campaign and GLAAD and all these advocacy groups. And they're filled with money. They have big buildings. The people who work there get big NGO salaries. And these activist groups don't want to win, because if they win, it means, okay, let's close up. Like you said, we won. So that means it's time to close up these activist groups. We don't need this constant, victimhood narrative. And this is true for every group, for Black groups, for the ADL. The ADL needs anti-Semitism. The NAACP needs racism epidemics now, and these feminist groups need misogyny. That's what they feed on. And so even if they win, they can't admit it. So what will happen is they'll start inventing whole new issues to claim injustice. And that's exactly when these gay groups stopped caring about gay and lesbian rights and moved into trans issues.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We have special guests with us, Nicholas Holscher, epidemiologist, administrator at the McCullough Foundation. He's here to talk about the latest study on sunscreen. Hi, Nicholas. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Now, we've covered this story before. Using our source was a Midwestern doctor, Substack, and he did a deep dive and found out that the people who were exposed the most to sun got the least amount of the deadly kind of sun cancer or skin cancer, which is melanoma. That's the deadliest form. And it turns out that the parts of their skin that didn't get sun was where that kind of cancer showed up. And they've known this for a long time. They've done studies where they've looked at office workers and people who worked outside, and it seems like the more sun you get, the more of a resistance you get to the deadly kind of skin cancer. So I just want to play this. This was you talking to our good friend Matthew Gates.
Have I been lied to as a Florida man about sunscreen protecting me from cancer?
Yes, it appears we've all been lied to, unfortunately. This massive study of over 470,000 people confirms it. It's very worrisome that when they compared sunscreen users to non-sunscreen users, the sunscreen users faced increased risks of all the major skin cancers: melanoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and basal cell carcinoma. So all of these cancers were up, but the most worrisome finding was that invasive melanoma was 300% higher higher risk in the sunscreen users. They accounted for skin color, time spent outdoors, and many other things, sex, age, and they still found these increased risks of the cancers. So when you use sunscreen all the time, you're blocking your body's ability to synthesize vitamin D, which is critical for cancer defense. So you do not want to shut that off. A JAMA study just came out and found all of those active ingredients in the sunscreens get into your circulation. They get into your body above FDA regulatory limits. So what I would say is avoid sunscreens if you really have to use it. If you'll be out in the sun for 6 hours midsummer day, you still want to use something. I would use zinc-based sunscreen, not oxybenzone, none of those hormone-disrupting chemicals.
Have I been?
So tell me about the latest study. Tell me about because there's been studies out there that we covered. Tell me about the most recent one.
Well, that would be the most recent one, but I think what's important to talk about is the one before that, and then so what led up to this latest one. So before that, the backstory is in 2018, a meta-analysis was published. A meta-analysis is literally a combination of every single study ever done on a topic. So they did a meta-analysis on the risk of skin cancer with sunscreen use compared to no sunscreen use. There was 30 studies. So all 30 of these studies since the 1980s was in this meta-analysis. When they combined all this 30 studies combined over the 40 years, the odds ratio of getting skin cancer when using sunscreen was over 1. So what that means is all the evidence of the past 50 years shows that, there is technically a higher risk of getting skin cancer when using sunscreen. Now, it was only 8%, and technically it wasn't statistically significant. So now we get to the important part. Over those 40 years, there was 370,000 people. Then we got to this next study in 2023 that had 470,000 people, larger than the 30 studies combined previously. And so the latest study found sunscreen users had increased risks of every single type of skin cancer, including invasive melanoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and basal cell carcinoma. But the invasive melanoma was 300% higher in the sunscreen users, higher than all the other cancers. And particularly what the study did, so not only was it the largest, but they accounted for all the major skin cancer risk factors as the confounding variable. So they were able to isolate the effect of the sunscreen use. So they accounted for time spent outdoors, sunburn history, skin color, age, gender, literally everything. And so that's the state of the epidemiological evidence that, you use sunscreen, you're at an increased risk of skin cancer.
So I saw when you posted this. So there was a lot of pushback, obviously. So people don't realize that doctors, maybe they do now because of COVID, are just as easily bought off and corrupted as a used car salesman. And in fact, you don't become a doctor because you oppose what's in the medical books or the medical dogma. You get to become a doctor because you go along with it, and they weed out the people who are rebels. But I wanted to. So this is what I'm just going to give an example of the kind of pushback. So this guy asks Gemini. So it asked AI, and he says, "No, this is completely false," meaning everything you just said. This claim is a classic piece of online misinformation that heavily distorts how scientific data works. There is no legitimate scientific study showing that sunscreen inherently causes or increases your risk of skin cancer. Now, that's not true, is that?
That's not true. Literally, again, all 30 studies combined of the past 40 years shows actually the risk is increased. I mean, so these individuals, I don't know, they just conflate. They basically make stuff up because they don't want to believe it's true, unfortunately. So what they'll say is, oh, it's just an association. And it's the sunscreen paradox where sunscreen users just go out in the sun more. But that doesn't explain why the study that accounted for going out in the sun more still found the increased risks in cancers.
Well, here's
So,
here's
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. They claim it's a paradox, right? So here's what he says: the sunscreen paradox, why the numbers are skewed. When researchers look at large observational population data, like the UK Biobank studies, they sometimes find that people who report using sunscreen also have higher rates of skin cancer. However, sunscreen isn't causing the cancer. Who uses sunscreen the most? People who have pale skin, burn easily, have a family history of skin cancer, or plan to spend hours out baking on the beach. These individuals already have a massively elevated baseline risk for skin cancer. What I said back to that was the research indicates that there's widespread sunscreen use has not reduced skin cancer rates, and in some cases increases it, like that study in the UK of over 470,000 people. This is from the Midwestern Doctor. It's worth pausing on how the 2023 study's authors handled their own results, having found that frequent sunscreen use tracked with more skin cancer. They did not consider that their model might be wrong. Instead, they labeled it a paradox, proposed that sunscreen users must be getting more sun or not applying enough or buying sunscreen after their diagnosis, and then concluded that the data demonstrates the importance of adequate and frequent sunscreen. So they went exactly against the data that their own study produced. And he says this is the same reflex behind the French paradox, the puzzle of why the French have less heart disease despite eating more saturated fat, which was only ever a paradox if you assumed saturated fat caused heart disease to begin with, an assumption resting on a far shakier foundation than the public was led to believe, as covered in an article on the manufactured war on cholesterol that was used to push toxic and ineffective but lucrative statins upon everyone. So what he's basically saying is that even though their own study revealed exactly what you're saying, they just said, oh no, it's just wrong. Even though that study you're quoting, it actually accounted for all these factors, correct?
Yeah, correct. It literally accounted for all of those factors mentioned. And when there's basically arguments over these population level estimates, that's when, like you did, we have to look into the biological plausibility. And there's lots of biological plausibility behind sunscreens causing cancer. The first one is that a recent analysis of like hundreds of sunscreen products found that 27% of them are contaminated with benzene, a known human carcinogen. And so now that we have a JAMA study showing that sunscreen ingredients are rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream upon topical administration, that means the benzene is rapidly absorbed deep into the skin. And so you literally are slathering carcinogens over yourself while at the same time blocking vitamin D production, which is literally critical for cancer defense.
And so you run into this stuff all the time when you post stuff that is heterodox to the line on sunscreen or anything medical, right? That saturated fat causes heart disease or sun is bad for you. And so you get these doctors who, I don't know where they got their degrees, but this isn't one of them. This guy, Yannick Buchcella, MD, he says, there is no evidence sunscreen causes cancer. None. Of course, we just told you about all the studies that say exactly that. The link between unprotected sun exposure and skin cancer, all types, is one of the most well-established findings in oncology. Well, I would say it's one of the most well-established narratives in oncology, not actually a finding. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that exactly. You know, it's the same kind of dogma with everything we've heard of. You know, they just say, "Oh, it's the most well-established," and it's not. It's just like you said, the most well-established narrative that's been perpetuated for many decades. And so those who have clung on to that for, 30 years of their professional life, they don't want to let go of it, and they will cling to the old narrative for as long as they can. But you cannot dispute slathering carcinogens on yourself as not possibly causing skin cancer. So they don't even look at any of these possible scenarios.
And it's not only the cancer-causing chemicals that are in the sunscreen. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Do some of the chemicals kind of transmute into cancer? So they're not originally cancer-causing, but over time, or when you put them on your skin and you add sun, it then kind of transmutes them into some kind of cancer-causing chemical, or am I wrong about that?
Well, that's possible, but starting with benzene, that's not supposed to be in there. It's just usually gets there from some contamination during manufacturing. But again, it's in like 1 in 4 sunscreens. The other things, the primary active ingredients in many sunscreens are oxybenzone and avobenzone. These are potent hormone disrupting chemicals that are highly toxic to human cells. And so, that just simply in and of itself, disrupting your hormones and throwing your body out of homeostasis will promote cancer growth. And again, those are literally the primary ingredients, avobenzone and oxybenzone in many of these sunscreens.
And so it messes with your normal biology and chemistry in your body, throws off your hormones, making you more likely to get cancer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so I posted this after that doctor posted his study, and I said, honestly, I feel bad for the people who go for your and this is right from Live Science, cancer-causing chemical found in 78 sunscreen products. That's not disputed, by the way. The independent lab that made the finding is calling on the FDA to recall these sunscreen products. And then this is the kind of pushback you get. This guy says, for people who are going to believe this, the chemical in question is benzene. Over 70% of sunscreen tested in this study didn't have benzene. I said, cool. So you're saying just 30% of the sunscreen causes cancer? Not sure that's the only you think it is. So, I mean, and so let me just give you a couple more facts. I say I'm citing myriad studies contained in Midwestern Doctor's Substack, where he cited common toxic chemicals used in UV filters in many sunscreens that face scrutiny for potential carcinogens, toxicity, absorption into the bloodstream, endocrine disruption, which is what you were just talking about, skin allergies, and environmental harm. Like, you can't even wear sunscreen in the ocean when you go swimming in Hawaii because it kills the coral reef. If it kills the coral reef, imagine what it's doing to you. After it's already diluted in the seawater, it'll still kill the coral reef. You're putting it right into your bloodstream. And here's some of those chemicals. Oxybenzone, most frequently cited as concerning. It absorbs readily through the skin, acts as a potential endocrine hormone disruptor, and has been linked in studies to reproductive issues, allergies, coral bleaching. FDA studies show bloodstream absorption. It's banned in places like Hawaii. How do you say that?
Oh, boy.
Doesn't matter. Strong evidence of endocrine disruption, also absorbed systemically and environmentally harmful to reefs. Homosalate, potential hormone disruption. So this is all the stuff that's in sunscreen. Here's some more. Avobenzone, some evidence of endocrine effects and absorption, can deregulate and produce byproducts. And then octocrylene, absorbed systemically, linked to allergies and potential degradation into benzophenone, a suspected carcinogen. So it then degrades into a different type of chemical that is a suspected carcinogen. And then octosalate, absorbed through the with weaker evidence of other harm. So it's always amazing to me. So we all know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but when I did my deep dive into sunscreen, that in the 80s, dermatology was on the lowest rung of the specialist MD ladder. And so they actually, the Dermatology Association hooked up with Madison Avenue Advertising, and they advised them to conflate deadly skin cancer like melanoma with the not deadly skin cancer, basal cell carcinoma. By the way, the survival rate of basal cell carcinoma after 5 years, 100%, just to let you know. So they conflated those and they just call it under one umbrella, skin cancer. So now people are afraid of the non-deadly lethal skin cancer basal cell as much as they are afraid of melanoma, because the Dermatology Association wanted people to conflate those so then they could get more money doing Mohs surgery, which is how you get rid of basal cell. And in fact, they would even do Mohs surgery they would go into retirement centers and nursing homes and do Mohs surgeries on people who are about to die. So that's about, it's just a big money maker for the dermatology profession. Are you aware of any of that?
Yeah, it sounds about right. It sounds very accurate, unfortunately. And so, yeah, so they're going to the nursing homes and cutting moles off of people on their deathbeds?
Yes.
That's quite shocking.
Yes.
Quite disappointing. And, the same individuals slathering sunscreen all over themselves are probably in support of that.
Okay, appreciate that. We'll have one more story I want to cover with you. First, let's throw it to Steph for some super chat.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what a show we've had today. Sunscreen. I know, Jimmy, when we were there, when we were on a vacation, this guy was standing by us and he was just spraying his sunscreen all over him. And it's like, well, there
was a cloud of it.
They told you not to use the sunscreen, and then you could just taste it.
There was
immediately.
There was a sign by the pool that said you are not allowed to use aerosol sunscreens, and that for that very reason, because it creates a cloud, and then it gets in your iced tea or your water, and it gets in, you breathe it in. I could taste, like you said, I could taste it, and they're spraying it all over everybody. And finally, I had to go get the guy working at the pool. Go, hey, could you tell them to stop it? And they did. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
It was a nightmare.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Please look into HARP, R-A. Good vibes. Shalom, everyone. Please let's ban Metzitza Bipe, direct oral suctioning, and save the poor infants. Fahimal, Maui children are still missing.
Of course.
Jimmy, V1, load every Zionist in the world on boats and send them to Antarctica, kidding. Blank every effing one of them.
Okay.
Jimmy. Back to Jim Jam.
So I want to remind people how we got the mRNA vaccine. It was never tested successfully, and the vaccine, they never had a successful coronavirus vaccine. But they really, really wanted to push this mRNA vaccine. And this is from the Milken Institute with Dr. Fauci, and he's telling you how they're going to have to scare the hell out of people and make them more afraid of a coronavirus than they should be, so then they can institute the rollout of mRNA shots. I don't even call them vaccines, but let's listen. It's very short.
Why don't we blow the system up? I mean, obviously, we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way that we grow vaccines mostly in eggs, the way we did in 1947.
You know why? Because we've been proven that works, and it's less toxic than an MR. So he'd say, why can't we just force this? You heard him. Why do we just force this on everybody? How do we got to get off the old vaccines that everybody's used to taking in their flu shot? We got to get something new on them. And here's what Fauci says.
In order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works, and then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years.
Of course, they didn't do that with the mRNA vaccine. It was rushed through. It's called warp speed. Is there a better way to bring a medicine to market than at warp speed? And so, of course, they didn't do any of that. Like he said, what did they do instead?
That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
Okay, so it didn't. They did it in 3 months. So they didn't take a decade to study the vaccine. They just rushed it through, and here we go.
Be a need or even an urgent call for an entity of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes.
So
you mean like a pandemic that's manufactured by this guy, inventing a virus at the University of North Carolina, shipping it to Wuhan lab, and then having it get out, accidentally get out and create a pandemic so we can have this new thing that is not subject to bureaucratic strings. Here's what he says about that.
We really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way.
Which is exactly what they did with COVID. I don't care if you're not afraid of coronavirus, we're going to make you afraid of it, and we're going to do it in a disruptive way. Was there ever a bigger disruption in humanity than the lockdowns from COVID? I don't think so. And so there he is telling you their plan, and that's just like a year before the pandemic.
But you do need both.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not even in your home at some point, and print those vaccines on a patch and self-administer.
So if that doesn't tell you exactly that they had this in mind and planned, they were talking about it in front of cameras with microphones. They were admitting their heinous, evil plan. They were admitting it. That's what that is. And so now we have doctors, the leading oncologists in the world. Here's one of them, Professor Angus, I can't pronounce his last name. How do you say his last name, Nick?
Dalgleish.
Dalgleish. So he's going to let you know that from his observational studies, he is drawing a connection between the mRNA vaccines and cancer. Now, let's watch.
That people who'd been stable with cancer, melanoma, for years started relapsing at the beginning of 22. And I asked for any reason why this might have occurred. And I noted they'd all been given boosters by their GPs, which if they'd asked me, I wouldn't have done that. And so you had to look around. What's the reason? Why would a booster allow a cancer to come back? Well, it turned out it's very simple, that boosters suppress the T cell response. The first two will increase it a bit, but a booster suppresses it. And that's exactly what we found. But then a group from Madrid published a wonderful paper saying T cell exhaustion after third COVID vaccine in cancer patients with an incredible data. It showed it very, very clearly. And so therefore, any cancer suppressed and controlled by the immune system, you suspect might pop up after the booster. Surgeons noted their colorectal patients were very difficult to treat. They were presenting late and they were presenting young. And they found that these patients had all had the booster too. And they called a red flag. And I called a red flag that just the suspicion that the vaccine might be involved in the cancer.
Are there any studies that have linked the mRNA to cancer? Is there any sort of medical process that you can allude to that back that up?
The strongest are the epidemiological studies, and the strongest was from Japan, a paper by Gibbo and his colleagues, which just had the raw data, and they noticed that the number of new cancer cases went up with each booster vaccine.
So, again, this goes against the orthodoxy, and of course we now know that not only medical boards, but the medical journals are completely corrupted by big pharma money, and universities as well, because they all relied on Dr. Fauci to fund their research and give them billions of dollars. And so now when a guy like this comes out and says this, they all attack him as he's some kind of a quack. But just what's your reaction to when you hear this, Nick?
Yeah, everything he says is 100% accurate. In fact, now over 70% of the global population was injected with a carcinogenic biological agent. And that biological agent is the mRNA gene transfer injections. We actually now have over 100 studies showing that the mRNA shots induce cancer or promote cancer via 17 distinct mechanisms. He mentioned T-cell exhaustion was one of them. You also have turning off of tumor suppressor genes, P53 and BRCA, hyperinflammation, overall immune dysregulation, as well as just literally decimating multiple organ systems at the same time because it goes everywhere in the body. And, it's just a massive list. It's an absolutely massive list of mechanisms, but, the epidemiological data is undeniable. We have 4 major data sets, and there's 2 in the United States. The first is the CDC Wonder mortality data. There's been 138,000 excess cancer deaths in the United States since the mRNA shots rolled out. Again, 138,000 more cancer deaths than normal. And then we had the SEER data set come out of the National Cancer Institute a few months ago. They found that multiple major cancers increased in young Americans right after the shots rolled out, including stomach cancer, colon cancer, brain tumors. They were up about 19%. So this should not be occurring. And then we had, lastly, Italian and South Korean studies totaling 8.7 million people combined, comparing vaccinated to unvaccinated. And the vaccinated individuals suffered increased risks of 7 major cancers: colon, prostate, breast, thyroid. All these cancers are up in the vaccinated. So it's undeniable both mechanistically and at the population level.
So there's a chemical called SV40. Now tell me about that, and why has this been found inside the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, SV40 is a portion of the DNA plasmid at the manufacturing process for the Pfizer mRNA injections. Basically, it's there to churn. It's there in the DNA plasmid at the factory to churn out the mRNA, to help churn it out. The DNA plasmids are still in the vials. They don't clean them out. They say they do, but they don't. Over 10 studies have found these DNA plasmids, including SV40 segment of the plasmids in the vials. And so when you inject it into people's arms, it's encased in the lipid nanoparticles. And we know SV40 is a cancer-promoting genetic material. And so that's going to get into all of your bodily systems and promote cancer, and actually it possibly inserting itself into genomes, portions of this DNA plasmid. And we demonstrated that in a peer-reviewed study. We found a segment of this so-called vaccine genetic material fused in chromosome 19 in a stage 4 turbo bladder cancer patient. And so, it's very bad. It's very, very bad. And that's another mechanism of promoting cancer, is insertional mutagenesis, or genomic integration of non-human synthetic vaccine DNA, causing uncontrolled cell growth.
And so here's the South Korean study you were talking about. 1-year risk of cancers associated with COVID-19 vaccination, a large population-based cohort study in South Korea. And I'll just read you a couple of lines from this. The oxygenogenic potential of SARS-CoV-2 has been hypothetically proposed, but real-world data on the COVID-19 infection and vaccination are insufficient. Therefore, this large-scale population-based retrospective study in Seoul, South Korea, aimed to estimate the cumulative incidences of subsequent risks of overall cancers 1 year after COVID-19 vaccination. Data from over 8 million individuals between 21 and 23 were obtained from the Korean National Health Insurance database. The participants were categorized into 2 groups based on their COVID-19 vaccination status. The risk for overall cancers were assessed using multivariable Cox proportional hazard models, and data were expressed as hazard ratios with a 95% confidence interval. The thyroid cancer, gastric cancer, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer significantly increased at a 1 year post-vaccination. So that's a gigantic study, 8 million people. And so why do you think that today this is still happening? That they're still giving out free mRNA COVID vaccines at CVS. What is going? I mean, is our government just that evil, or are they just that corrupt, or both?
It's both. It's both. And honestly, I don't have a good answer as to why they're doing this. It's now, at this point, with all this evidence, it does qualify as a form of homicide. It may be mass negligent. We don't know yet. That has to be kind of rolled out. What sort of crime is being committed here now? Because we know it's causing these cancers. We know it's actually caused mass deaths, extreme blood clotting, including white fibrous clots. A study came out on that 2 days ago. 25% of corpses have these long anomalous clots in them now. 75% of embalmers are finding them. And yeah, so it's criminal. And we know the FDA literally covered up 25 safety signals in early 2021. Ron Johnson's team found that out with internal communications between FDA officials. They literally buried a sudden cardiac death signal. It was killing people, children, teenagers, everybody. And they told the scientists that found those signals to cease and desist, right? So that is a crime to hide death signals from a product you're telling millions of people to get.
And so people have been attacking that professor. And so I asked Grok, please answer my question succinctly. That professor who's the oncologist, the world-renowned oncologist who's correlating and connecting the shots with cancer. And I said, please answer my question as succinctly as possible without adding commentary or qualifiers. The people attacking the professor, world-renowned oncologist, were wrong about most things to do with COVID in retrospect, like lockdown, school closures, vaccine stopping transmission and contraction, and social distancing, correct? Grok says yes. So there you go. When you see someone like that on social media, and then you see him being attacked, remember the people attacking him were wrong about everything to do with COVID. You'll see posts like this. He's a world-renowned grifting quack. Right? That's what people say. And so I asked Grok. I says, is this world-renowned oncologist really world-renowned? Is he a leader in the field who was well-respected before he spoke out on COVID? Yes. He is a legitimate, well-respected oncologist with a strong pre-COVID reputation in his field. He's not fringe or unknown. And here's his credentials. He's got great, unbelievable credentials. He's held senior roles in oncology and immunology for decades. And he's discovered of CD4 as a major receptor for HIV. He pioneered work on cancer, immunotherapy, and vaccine. And he's contributed to the development of something I can't pronounce, which led to him receiving the Joshua Lederberg Prize in 2011. I could go on and on. He's got a great reputation. And I said, well, is he a quack? They go, no, he's not a quack. He's credentialed and career. He's the founding chair of oncology at St. George's University of London since 1991. He's a fellow of respected bodies, the Academy of Medical Sciences, Royal Colleges, extensive publication record, hundreds of papers he's published, strong citations in immunology and oncology, and contributions to HIV research and cancer immunotherapy. His pre-COVID standing, respected in his niche for tumor immunology, cancer vaccines, HIV. Colleagues viewed him as a productive clinician scientist. So, of course, after he came out and went against the orthodoxy and told the truth about his findings with cancer and the jabs, now they're calling him a quack. We've seen this over and over. Not only Dr. McCullough, leader in his field, but anybody, the guy what's his name, who invented the mRNA vaccine technology, we've had him on the show. Dr. Robert Malone, right? Again, the guy who has vaccine patents, the guy who invented the mRNA vaccine platform that was based, that they used the COVID shot based on, they're now calling him a quack. So anybody who goes against Big Pharma's narrative they're going to call a quack. I just wanted to show people that one of the most leading oncologists in the world, they'll also try to dismiss. And what do you think it's going to take, Nick? What do you think it's going to take for regular people to realize that they were lied to about COVID on a scale their brains cannot comprehend?
It's going to take an injury or death in their family from one of these products. I think in the end, particularly for those who have received 6, 7, 8, 9 mRNA booster shots, while something bad may not have happened to them or somebody they know, the moment something does, that's when most people wake up. And that's what I've seen. Now, but it's very sad for people who have taken 6 booster shots. An autopsy study recently came out and found basically their hearts look like Swiss cheese under the microscope, not with holes, but with multiple micro scars. And so these shots literally cause little microscopic scars throughout the heart that lead to sudden death.
Do you think we'll ever have a person who's, you know, what, like when Walter Cronkite turned on the Vietnam War, that's what they said it was the end of the. Do you think that there'll be someone who's respected in society that comes out and says something about this, that people will finally wake up?
I think it's going to have to come from the propaganda mainstream media outlets that these individuals religiously watch. It's going to have to come from CNN and all these other outlets, unfortunately. And so, but they're captured by Big Pharma, they're captured by Pfizer. And so, you know, it's going to be very difficult to get that to happen. But it needs to happen for the sake of public safety. You know, we had an ongoing long-term mass casualty event, right? We have to put an end to it somehow.
Nicholas Holscher at the McCullough Foundation, I appreciate you taking time to help explain all this to everybody. Everybody should follow you on X, on Twitter, at Nick Holscher. And thanks again for taking time for us, pal.
Thanks you.
Okay. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. No. Oh, let's go to Rumble. We'll see you over at Rumble.